I mean, signifying is a very, very layered. I would say it's a very layered aspect that comes out of the blues aesthetic, not necessarily the 5 or 6 note scale that we're known to associate the blues with, or the 12 bar form. You know what I mean? 12, 14, 6, 8 bar form, 4 bar form of the blues. We're talking about more or less aesthetic qualities that have been preserved from Africa into the African-American experience or the African-American tradition. And part of that aesthetic is also call and response, ring shout, field hollers, spirituals, things like that, things of that nature. Signifying has a lot of different meanings, and I'm not entirely sure if I'm getting this correct, but I think that what signifying does, it provides a double meaning, at least in literature. I know that has that aspect in literature and in different forms of art. Another way that we would look at it from a literature aspect, we would call it shooting the dozens or ribbon.
Okay.
New Orleans. That's kind of along the same lines of signifying.
Okay.
Whereas, you call somebody a name and you call them out of affection, or you making fun of or poking fun of something.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? A musical example of signifying would be, it's done all the time in hip hop, sampling, is a form of signifying, where you take something that's already pre-existing, and then you slow it down, or you change the key, or you take snippets of it and then you splice and cut it and turn it into something brand new. Mm-hmm. But there's a direct relation to something that's already existing. An example of something that's carried over in the music would be like writing a contrafact to I Got Rhythm. It's a tune that already, and a whole bunch of people just came and kind of hinted at that and went off on all kinds of things, different types of melodies. I would say the other part of signifying could be that's understanding like certain codes in how, different riffs and different grooves and certain things that resemble something else. For instance, the Charleston. That's what I say, bump, 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 bump,
right.
bump, 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 so that rhythm carried over into a comping figure signifies that tune.
Okay.
You know what I'm saying? Or, for instance, J.L. Morton had a composition, he played Maple Leaf Rag, and he kind of, in his description of it, he said, this is my creation of what jazz is, as opposed to a version of it. He's paying respects to it, but he's twisting it around, and he's doing different things with it, keeping the same literature, but adding layers on it. Mm-hmm. That's an example of signifying. Kind of, sort of, almost similar to how we look at trading. When we trade 8s or trade 4s with each other, horn player play, and then another horn player play, and they'll trade and they'll battle. That's kind of like them kind of like playing off of each other out of respect, but it's also kind of like almost duking it out a little bit. That's my, I don't know if I got this exactly correct, and I'm sure that there are probably going to be a few people who are more experts at that than I am that would probably want to chime in on that, but that's my understanding of it so far.
Okay. Well, thanks. That really cleared things up a lot. Yeah. So whenever we talked about your origins in the music, you came from the church and you played a lot in the church growing up, right? Uh-huh. So from someone like myself who doesn't come from that background, it seems to me like growing up in the church opens a lot of doors for you musically. It lets you get to the roots of a lot of this music very quickly. So whenever I'm somebody who is not coming from that background and is trying to play this music, what's maybe the best way for me to try to get in touch with the roots of what this music is?
You talking about gospel music? per se.
Gospel music, and also I feel like there's a deep element of blues in gospel music that maybe it's harder for me to understand later on, since I don't have that background.
Well, I think you'll never really fully be able to understand the power behind it unless you see it at work, unless you see it in action, unless you know what happens when you do a certain thing and you see a physical response to it from people who may not have any type of musical background. Like I remember times growing up as a kid, and I always thought that this was kind of like magical almost. I would play something and it would be in a real softer range or register, and everybody would be looking at me strange. They'd be like, what is that you're playing? But then if I played the exact same thing, but a different drawbar setting and higher part of the organ or whatever, then the church is riled up. They've gotten
right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, you know, to me, there's certain elements in the music, because it's a folk music, and we can't forget that, like jazz, gospel music at its root is a folk music. And unless you're able to witness the folk element behind the music, you'll never really be able to capture the true magic, the true essence of it. So I would say, first you have to experience it. You just have to go and you have to see, you know, how people respond. Unfortunately, I would say nowadays, I mean, people can blame it on Corona, but even before Corona, you know, there's certain elements of the tradition of the Black church as far as how the music was played that got lost, in my opinion. How we approached hymns, certain drawbar settings on the organ, understanding the difference between different types of line meters. There's a whole lot of elements that got lost because people are trying to put butts in the seats and trying to keep it modern. You know what I mean?
Right. Sure.
And I would say it's the same thing in jazz. You know, there's an influx of youth and there's an influx of different cultures coming in, and we want to be inclusive of everybody, you know. But with that inclusion, there's certain elements that I feel probably had gotten lost. And, you know, if you're fortunate enough to be in a situation where you actually see it offhand and you witness it offhand, you'll understand certain elements and certain things that you could do that really evoke a certain type of emotion, or evoke a certain type of dance, or evoke a certain type of way that somebody would shout, like a mother would just scream in the background. You know what I mean?
Right.
You playing her favorite song that way. You know what I'm saying? If you played it another way, she wouldn't get it. But if you played it that way, she'd get it. You know what I mean?
Right. Totally.
Yeah.